When people hear the name Saddam Hussein, they think of one of the most brutal dictators of the 20th century. But behind the walls of Saddam's palaces, another figure lurked in the shadows. A man even more twisted, more unpredictable, and in many ways more terrifying than Saddam himself. His eldest son, Uday Hussein. Uday had unlimited power, unimaginable wealth, and complete immunity in Iraq during his father's reign. But instead of using this power for leadership or legacy, he indulged in cruelty, sadism, and a monstrous appetite for domination, especially over women. This story is not easy to hear. In fact, it is one of the darkest and most disturbing chapters of modern history. The tale of Saddam's son, whose obsession with control and violence created a reign of terror that was hard to stomach. The birth of a monster Uday was born in 1964, the eldest son of Saddam Hussein. From childhood, he was groomed to inherit his father's empire. But unlike his younger brother, Hussein, who was cold but calculating, Uday was erratic and sadistic. Teachers recalled that he had an uncontrollable temper. Classmates feared him, not because of his intelligence or strength, but because of the punishments he could order with just a word: expulsion, beatings, or worse. By the time he was a teenager, people whispered that Uday was untouchable. Saddam adored his son, but he also feared him. Even Saddam once admitted Uday was unbalanced. Still, he granted him limitless privileges: palaces, cars, money, and women. And it was here that Uday's darkest impulses began to surface: the predator of Baghdad. To the outside world, Uday Hussein was a playboy, always surrounded by luxury, gold-plated guns, and exotic cars. But behind the palace walls, he was something far more sinister: a predator. His favorite pastime was prowling Baghdad's streets in expensive sports cars, accompanied by bodyguards. If Uday saw a woman he desired, she had no choice. His men would abduct her, throw her into a vehicle, and deliver her to one of his palaces. There, the nightmare began. Women were forced to entertain him, often against their will. Those who resisted faced brutal violence. Some disappeared forever, their families left without answers. Foreign women were not safe either. At parties thrown by Uday, even diplomats' wives and daughters were targeted. To say no to Uday was impossible. He had absolute power, and he knew it. The wedding day horror. One of the most infamous stories of Uday's cruelty came during a wedding in Baghdad. It was supposed to be a joyous occasion. Families gathered, music filled the air, and the bride prepared for her new life. But when Uday arrived, everything changed. He saw the bride and decided he wanted her. In front of hundreds of shocked guests, his guards seized her and dragged her away. The groom was powerless. No one dared to interfere, not even the bride's family. That night, the bride was taken to one of Uday's mansions. Her life, her marriage, and her dignity were destroyed in a single evening. This was not an isolated incident. Stories of Uday stealing brides on their wedding days became whispered warnings across Iraq. Torture chambers in the palace Uday's cruelty didn't stop at sexual violence. Inside his lavish palaces were hidden chambers, places of unspeakable torment. Women who defied him, or whom he grew tired of, were often subjected to sadistic torture. Survivors described rooms filled with whips, electrical devices, and even cages. Some women were beaten until unconscious. Others were never seen again. These chambers also doubled as prisons for athletes, soldiers, and even political enemies. For Uday, torture wasn't just punishment, it was entertainment. The athlete's nightmare. While Uday's crimes against women were horrific, His cruelty extended beyond them. As the head of the Iraqi Olympic Committee and the National Football Association, Uday turned sports into a theater of terror. If Iraq's athletes lost a match, he would order their imprisonment, beatings, and sometimes worse. Football players described being forced to kick concrete balls until their legs broke. Others were flogged in front of teammates. One player said, "Losing a game was not just defeat. It was a death sentence." Women athletes, too, were not safe. Those who caught Uday's eye were summoned to his palaces. If they refused, their careers and lives ended. The untouchable playboy. Uday's lifestyle was grotesque extravagance built on fear. He owned more than 1,200 luxury cars, some gold-plated. He hosted endless parties, fueled by alcohol and drugs, despite his father's public condemnation of Western decadence. He surrounded himself with models, dancers, and actresses, many brought to Iraq under false promises. For Uday, women were disposable. He treated them as objects, trophies to be displayed, used, and discarded. But while the outside world whispered rumors, inside Iraq, everyone stayed silent. To speak against Uday was suicide. The day of the beating. Even Saddam Hussein sometimes lost patience with his son. In 1988, during a diplomatic dinner in Egypt, Uday murdered one of Saddam's closest friends, his father's valet and food taster. Why? Because the man had introduced Saddam to a new wife, which made Uday jealous. In a fit of rage, Uday stabbed him to death in front of horrified guests. This act nearly cost him his life. Saddam ordered Uday beaten so severely that his back was broken. For weeks, Uday couldn't walk. Yet even then, he was spared. Any other Iraqi would have been executed instantly. But Uday was Saddam's son, and he remained untouchable. The car attack. In 1996, Uday's enemies finally struck back. Gunmen ambushed his Porsche in Baghdad, firing bullets into his body. Uday survived, but was left partially paralyzed. He required years of surgery and could no longer walk normally. But instead of humbling him, the attack made him even more vicious. Confined to a cane and a wheelchair, Uday's temper grew more unpredictable. He compensated with cruelty, demanding more women, more violence, more fear. The fall of the House of Hussein. When the US-led invasion of Iraq began in 2003, Uday became one of the most wanted men in the country. His crimes were well known, and many Iraqis longed for revenge. In July 2003, US forces tracked Uday and his brother Qusay to a villa in Mosul. After a fierce 4-hour gun battle, both brothers were killed. For many Iraqis, it was a day of grim relief. But for the families of the women Uday had abducted, assaulted, or killed, his death brought little comfort. Justice had come too late. The legacy of fear today. Uday Hussein is remembered not as a leader, but as a monster. His name is synonymous with cruelty, corruption, and unchecked power. For Iraqi women, his legacy is one of terror, a reminder of how absolute power in the hands of one sadistic man can destroy countless lives. Even among the world's most notorious figures, Uday stands out as a chilling warning of what happens when evil is allowed to flourish unchecked. Hard to stomach. The story of Uday Hussein is not just a tale of one man's evil. It is a story of silence, fear, and the devastating price women paid under a regime where one man's desires outweighed an entire nation's dignity. For the women who were stolen, abused, and silenced, their suffering remains one of the darkest chapters in Iraq's modern history. And as much as we might want to look away, history demands we do not forget. Because what Saddam Hussein's son did especially to women, is truly hard to stomach.